sewing room. If you haven't been here before, my name is Rosemary, and today I thought we would just do something fun and make something for Christmas. My family has decided that we're going to take a Christmas picture, and we're gonna all be wearing pajamas, and it's going to be this black and red check, and you see it in the stores, and my son said, don't worry about it, Mom, we can go and buy it, but of course I have to make it, so I'm going to make something. And you know me, I went to Joann's and I looked for a sale, and they had patterns for $1.99, so I had to buy more than one. So I bought lots of these cute little ones that have children's pajamas on it, because I have, as you know, I have 3 great-grandchildren. There's Luna and Matthew and Coda Bear, and I want to make them pajamas out of this fabric. And I even got this one here that's a cute little kind of a fluffy nightgown that I might make for Luna. I haven't worked this out yet. We're going to kind of play this by ear. I'm not even sure how much of the construction I'm going to show on the video, but I do want to do something fun, show you how to use your serger, pin something together, cut it out. As you can see, I've already got started cutting this one out for me. I found this one just as I was leaving the fabric store, up sitting on top of the cabinets, and it's like a long little lounging gown. I'll put a picture up in the corner so you can see what it is, but it's perfect. It's exactly what I wanted, something that I can wear all day long at my family's house at Christmas time. It even has pockets in it, which is kind of fun. That might be something fun to do, show you how to put pockets in. Okay, so anyway, that's what we're going to do in this video today, and we're going to get started with cutting it out, and then I'm going to show you how to start sewing it together. Okay, so what I've done is I went ahead and I serged all of the edges of this. It was one of those things where it was really hard for me to figure out whether I wanted to put it on my serger and sew it together, because this is flannel and flannel fraise, so I did want the edges finished. But at the same time, I don't know if I wanted to try and sew this together on my serger, because it's got pockets which have very sharp little corners, and it's got a little thing in the front here that opens up and has loops on it and buttons, and that might be a little bit difficult to do with it serged at the same time. So it's kind of like a back and forth, and you have to decide what you want to do. And sometimes when you read these instructions on these patterns, even me, who has been sewing since I was probably 11 years old, was confused. I was just like, what the heck are they telling me to do on this pattern? I'm really confused, especially the pictures that they draw. And you look at these pictures and you think, are you kidding me? Do they really want me to fold this flat, or do they want me to fold it over to the side, or what the heck are they telling me to do? So what I thought I would do is just kind of show you a couple little tricks that I have figured out for putting in pockets, and for maybe doing that front facing that's on there, and then we'll do some pajama pants on the serger for the little grandchildren, and at the end I'll show you a picture of all of us in our pajamas. Okay, so the first thing that I was having problems with was this picture right here. What the heck is that trying to tell me? I don't understand. They're trying to draw it so that the folds are going this way and then the folds are going that way, and it's confusing. So I actually had to sew it together to kind of see what it meant. So the first thing that I had to do was to take this, the placket piece, and put some interfacing on it, and then I serged the edge. It says to take it and to fold it over 1/4 of an inch so that you have a hem on it, but why do that? So I just took it to my serger and I serged one end, and then I sewed it from the dot down to the end, and then I sewed my front piece together, and then we have to go put it on to the sewing machine. It's a lot of fabric right here, and make it flat and press it out. And then you have to, right side up, then you have to take this placket piece and you have to lay it right sides together on this piece here, but it's not flat because we have a seam in here, and the seams have to come together. So that's why the drawing is so confusing, because I actually have to take this piece here and put it on here, and sew with the seam allowance still out right down to this point where it comes together, And I'll go ahead and I'll do that. Let's see. And I don't know if you can see this, which makes it even more confusing than the picture, is I have this part of the front pushed down out of the way, and I have the seam allowance laying flat and this seam allowance lying flat. And I'm going to sew right to the black line right here where I started sewing that together. And I'll reverse it a little bit and then cut it. Then I have to take this whole piece and flip it so this part is up, and then this part is here. And I can actually understand why they couldn't draw that. That's kind of hard to make people understand. And looking at the picture, I probably would have quit right from the beginning if I hadn't started, just start putting it together and figuring it out as I go along. So I'm going to go, I accidentally unthreaded my machine. And now we're going to sew this other part. You know what I forgot? I'm going to have to rip this out because I forgot to put those little loops in there. So hang on just a minute. So see this part right here where it says to put those little loopies on there? I forgot to do that completely. So we're going to go back and we're going to do that. And I made these, take my word for it, when you cut these out, it says to do it on the bias, do it on the bias, because if you don't, you won't be able to turn it. And you can see mine are not that thin, and if you can make yours even smaller and tinier, all power to you. But this is okay. This is going to work for what I want. I'll probably put large buttons on it anyway. Okay, so I went ahead and I took those little loopies and we got red and black on top of red and black. So I don't know if you can see this, but I put them and I pinned them down there with pins. And then I'm going to put that facing back to where I had it before. I had to rip. So we're going to just kind of maneuver this around and put it right here. I don't care how long you've been sewing. There's always going to be a time when you go, oh, I did that wrong. I have to rip it out. We all have to do it. We all have to have a seam ripper. Okay, so I have that in place, and now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew this. And I'm going to sew it right down to that same beginning point where the black thread starts, where I put the facing together at. This is going to be slow going over all that bulk. And then down to here. And then we're going to stop and cut the thread. And now I'm going to flip it around and we're going to see what we did. Okay, so I brought this thing over to my cutting table so we can look at it a little bit closer. And you can see that this is the seam that I sewed down to here, and then we had to move the whole seam allowance over and then sew the seam down to here. And this is the part where it came together. So it looks a little weird. Actually, it looks a little bit like that picture that was so confusing now that I look at it all sewn together, but it looks pretty good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this whole thing and we're going to flip it to the wrong side of the fabric like this. And I'm going to flip this over. And now that it's on the wrong side of the fabric and we push it down this way, I'll take it and I will press this really good. But see how nice and flat that lays? And I'm going to be honest with you, I said that these loops were okay, but I don't like them. They're too fat. I'm going to try and sew them. Even with this thick flannel, I'm going to take them out of there. I'm going to sew them again and make them really tiny and see if they work. And then if I have to, I might even have to get a different kind of fabric, like a stretch knit or something, to make that work. So I have some little tiny loops instead of those great big fat ones. But anyway, the most important thing is see how nice and flat this lays. And since I did not turn this corner around and to try and do a little hem, and I'm not going to try and hand stitch that down. I'm just going to press it like crazy. I'm going to sew across the top here when I get to the ruffle part, and sew down here across the bottom, and it's going to stay put where I want it to be. So next step is pockets. So let's move on to pockets. if you look at your pattern, you will find that there is usually like a big dot or something that says put your pocket here. So this is where we want to put it. I put pins on there exactly where I want that to be. And here's my pocket, and there's a right side and a wrong side. So we want to make sure we got the right sides are together. And I'm going to line this up and pin this in place. But what's more important than getting it exactly where the pattern tells you to put the pocket is to get the front and the back lined up. So this is my back, and this is the front piece that I just finished working on. And then I'm going to put line up my underarm sleeve part right here, and I'm going to make sure that I put this one exactly in the same spot that one is. So when I go to sew them together, they come together right, and I don't have to rip more than I want to rip. So, well, I never want to rip, but let's face it, we all have to every once in a while, but I don't want to have to rip this out. So I want to make sure that this is lined up. And then another thing I might do is I might hold it up to my body and make sure that that pocket's coming exactly where I want it to be, because everybody's a little bit different. And I already did that. That's where I have the pins there. So now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and I'm going to just sew the pocket onto this part on all 4 different pieces. Okay, so I went ahead and I sewed that seam right there, just the way I showed you. Now I'm going to open it up and make it flat like this. And then I'm going to put the other side of the nightgown on top of that one. And match my pockets like this. And I'm going to press my seam open. And I'll put a pin right here, like that. And then I'm going to take this and line this up all the way up here to the underarm seam, right there. And then we're just going to go ahead and we're going to sew a 5/8 seam allowance all the way down. Okay, so now I've done the 5/8 seam all the way down to where the pocket begins, and I'm going to go into the seam probably about an inch. I don't want to go that far into it, but I don't want to come right to the end of it either. So that's about where I want to go, and I'm going to hit the scissors and cut that. Then I'm going to go back, and I'm going to push this back open again. And turn this whole thing around, and I'm going to start right here at the edge of the pocket. Let me see if I can smooth this out a little bit. We're going to start right here at the beginning of the pocket, and we're going to sew around. There's always a lot of bulk when you're doing something like this. And here we go. We're going to sew around. And I'm going to sew up to where the seam comes together right here. And then I'm going to hit the scissors. And then I'm going to turn it again. And I'm going to take my pin out and push my seam allowance back towards the pocket again, so I can find where my seam started to sew the pocket on, and I'm going to continue that stitch. So that's where my seam finished when I was sewing the pocket on. I'm going to line that up. I'm going to put the needle down, and then I'm going to just continue that down. Okay, so I'm back at my cutting table, and here's my pocket all sewn. Here's the seam that goes straight down to the edge right here and comes into the pocket, and then you press it open, and and you sew around the pocket, and then you start right at the edge here and come down. And so what that ends up resulting in, let me flip this over to the other side, is we have a seam that comes into the pocket a little bit right here, so it's not right on the edge, and the pocket comes down in here like this. So I'm very pleased with the way that looks. It's nice and flat. It's almost invisible on one side, but I got a nice pocket in there. Okay, so this pattern has a little ruffle right across the top, and it's sewn on separately. And it's a little bit complicated right around the neck here where you add the elastic, and they don't tell you to sew a casing, and they actually tell you to use the seam allowance to make a casing. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and then we'll go on and we'll show you some of the little nightgowns and stuff I made out of the same fabric. So I have a confession to make. I lost one of my video clips. So I don't have anything of me sewing the collar onto this, but I want to show you the pattern piece so that you can see it and see what we're going to do next. We're actually going to take the pattern piece that is the ruffle, and we're going to sew it onto the neckline, and then we're going to trim it away. So if you look at the pattern piece, the first thing you got to do is take that piece and finish the edges, and then pin it to your neckline and then sew it on. And then I'm going to show you how to trim it away and make a casing. So I went ahead and I stitched this. As you can see, my stitching is 5/8 seam allowance. Maybe I should have made it even wider, because this is a little tiny thing that we have to trim off of here. So I have a small pair of scissors, and I'm going to trim the nightgown piece, and then I'm going to open this up for the two sides of the ruffle, and trim one side of the ruffle off. And I have to work that around all around the neckline, so that's going to take me a little while to do that. But once I do that, then if I flatten this piece out like this, and then bring this down, I have to turn 1/4 of an inch down and under, and then put a pin in that right here, and then top stitch this all the way around. And what I'm worried about is that this is going to make a very small elastic channel, but I have 1/4 inch elastic that will fit through it, so hopefully that's going to work okay. So I'm going to finish trimming this, and I'm going to go to my sewing machine and top stitch it, and then we'll finish up the facing and see what it looks like. Hopefully, I've said this before, sometimes I'm doing this by the seat of my pants. I've never done this before. I've always sewed a piece of bias tape or something in to make an elastic channel, but this is the way the directions say to do it, so this is the way I'm going to do it. So let's see what happens. Okay, so I finished the nightgown, and I think it came out really pretty. I put a couple of big black buttons up here on top, and I did finish that neckline. I put the elastic through it. I have to confess that I ripped out that seam and made it a full inch instead of the 5/8, because it just wasn't going to be big enough for me to pull an elastic through it to get a good neckline elastic. If I'd made it really thin elastic like you put in dog clothes, it wouldn't have pulled in it well enough. So I did do that, and I didn't put elastic around the bottom of the sleeves because I kind of like the fact that these have bell sleeves, and they're not going to bug me if I do decide to sleep in this gown. But I think it came out really nice. It's a really pretty granny gown, and while I was doing that, I went ahead and made almost the exact same thing for my great-granddaughter Luna. It has the same kind of a neckline without the little opening right here, and I embroidered Minnie Mouse on the bottom and put a ruffle around it. This is like a short little top. She'll have some little pants to go under it, and then I'm going to make some for the boys, and I might even make a few for some of my other grandchildren. And I'm hoping that we will all be able to get together right after Thanksgiving and take a great big family picture, and I'll share that with all of you to see how all the little pajamas came out. So I'm not sure if this was a helpful video or if it was just for fun, if you learned anything about sewing, but I hope you had a good time. I hope you all have a really Merry Christmas, and I will see